Well, last week I complained that the show was not moving the ball down the field, and then this week John Favreau apparently called me a dork and then threw a perfect Hail Mary touchdown because what an episode. I'm Brian. That's Willie. This is M.A.N.D.O. Willie, let's get into it. Chapter 11, The Heiress, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. Tell me your favorite part. I suspect I know what your favorite part is, but tell me your favorite episode, or your part of the episode.
I think we may have the same favorite part, but okay. Literally just, we're gonna take you go to this planet to find a Jedi named Ahsoka Tano.
So that was not my favorite part, but I suspected that was your favorite part. I'm gonna hold my thing about Ahsoka, but how did you feel? Did you think we were gonna have to wait longer for Ahsoka, or did you think that this was timed right?
I think this was timed pretty right, actually. I think we knew she was coming this season, and especially with what we were talking about, last week. I think last week, even though it was only the second episode of the season, I think it felt a little directionless.
Yes.
We've got some direction now.
We certainly have some direction. My favorite part of the episode, without question, was Bo-Katan lands. By the way, Bo-Katan's in the show, in live action, played by Katie Sackhoff, the voice actors from Clone Wars and Rebels. How incredible is that? Bo-Katan lands, takes off her helmet. Mando's like, what the hell? And she just instinctively goes, he's one of them. And to me, I was just like, to me, it was very similar to the moment in BioShock when they tell you, thank you kindly, and you realize that you've kind of been played this whole time, and you're like, oh shit, am I the bad guy? Is the M.A.N.D.O and the armorer and this is the way? It's all immediately turned on its head a little bit because Bo-Katan, who we know and like and have rooted for previously in other Star Wars properties, says that the Children of the Watch, meaning Death Watch, are a religious cult of zealots, trying to install the old ways of the Mandalorian. We're like, holy shit, we're just going right in. So yeah, that moment of her just saying, he's one of them, it really got me. And I was like, this just went to a 10 for me, because now I'm like, is Mando the bad guy? Is he part of this? Is this bad?
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting too, because at certain points in the show, or in the past show, her character's kind of been on the bad side too. And
a member of Death Watch.
Yeah, as a member of Death Watch, and now, bringing her into live action, but also, there was a lot of conversation last season about, well, how come we've seen, is this a plot hole? Are they retconning, Mandalorian beliefs? What are they doing with this thing? And yeah, I mean, it is a really big deal for it to be like, oh, this is just what he thinks. This is not what most Mandalorians think.
Exactly. And yeah, the helmet thing was so smart, because that was a question we all had. We're like, how are they going to address this? And then to make it, because obviously in basically every other version of Star Wars, the Mandalorians take their helmets off all the time. So when that was introduced in the first season, as you don't take your helmet off, and if anybody takes it off from you, you're dishonored, or whatever it is. So to have that be now that's a cult thing, it's a really interesting way to go, and I'm very excited to see how that plays out. And they did key it up a little bit, and there's even a moment later in the episode when Bo-Katan uses "this is the way." It's kind of almost like a fuck you. Yeah. And I really just loved that. So super excited to see where that goes. What surprised you about this episode?
So my surprising thing for this episode was how dark this episode actually was. He goes to kill himself, just to take down the whole thing, and then that's after he kills his two pilots. It's not messing around, and it just tonally just felt very, very dark, for Star Wars. And then the other thing was a surprise, going with Bo-Katan. I thought it was going to be Sabine. So I was a little, I do not have the same affinity for Bo-Katan that I do for Sabine. So but either way, that was still a surprising moment, coming out like she did. So.
For sure. It's so funny that you say that, 'cause my surprise thing is no, I just wrote down no Sabine question mark. Because I feel like we had heard that Sabine was probably going to be in this season, or like it was heavily rumored that Sabine was in this, and I don't remember ever hearing about Bo-Katan. And I think maybe Katie Sackhoff had been like rumored to have like a cameo of some kind, and like, are they gonna do Bo or they're not gonna do Bo? I just don't remember that, like, that being a big thing. Obviously, Boba Fett, Ahsoka were the two big ones, but yeah. So my surprising thing was certainly no Sabine, who previously, just for a bit of lore catch up for anybody that's not familiar, Sabine Wren was a member of the Rebels crew, and she gave the Darksaber to Bo, and Bo had it when last we saw it before the events of the Mandalorian. So Bo is obviously trying to retrieve that from Moff Gideon. So yeah, but to your point about the darkness of the episode, I really was struck by the officer taking the poison capsule or whatever it was, like the suicide capsule. I was like, I've never seen that in Star Wars. It's more of like an MCU Hydra thing to do. So again, an interesting play to see that this Empire remnant, or whatever they're calling themselves, is really not messing around.
Mm-mm.
So, anything you didn't like about this episode?
Yeah, and so I think my biggest pet peeve about this episode is the same thing we've talked about for the past couple of weeks. I still think the show is suffering from just not setting things up very well. We had the same thing this episode where he lands on the planet to meet a guy who will tell him about a guy, who will introduce him to someone, and then he'll find the plot. And it's getting to the point where I'm wondering if they like it so much that this is just going to be how it goes. But I feel like, especially when they're doing so well in some other areas, like there's much tighter ways to plot his course from planet to planet and to plot, how everything's going to go through. But
I agree. It does feel very episodic. I think we're a little bit spoiled with some of the TV, or the way TV has gone in the past like decade plus, with things like Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, all of that, which is Mad Men, which tell a very narrative arc. So I think this is really and maybe it's Filoni's animation background, because it does feel almost like an animation episode where you're like, here's open on kind of where we last saw them, and then hijinks ensue, and then there's some heavy plot stuff. So I totally agree. My favorite, and I'm sorry to do this to you, is actually, I think we're getting Ahsoka too early, because
but we didn't get her. We just got mention of her.
That's true. That's fair, and we might not get her for a few episodes. Like, there might be another detour, but if you remember, my 3 jump the shark moments for this show, to complete the full jump the shark, is Boba Fett, side characters from Rebels and Clone Wars, so which we got with Bo and which we're getting with Ahsoka, and then the third one is A-tier legacy characters. So we've hit 2 sharks on the shark meter. We're 2 out of 3 for me, so I'm starting to get a little worried. But I like the introduction of Bo into this show and this world. I like that they're doing that. I'm just worried that we're going to get too much too soon. But hopefully you're correct, and that they're going to space Ahsoka out a little bit, and it's going to be this episode really almost felt like a season finale. Like, if the first 5 or 6 minutes didn't happen, like if he just showed up on the freighter and was like trying to get a job, and then Bo shows up, like, this totally feels like a setup to a next season. So,
True.
but yeah, I'm just a little worried that the Mandalorian is gonna use all the tools in the utility belt too quickly.
And I think that's very fair. I mean, especially since, I mean, we haven't had that many episodes of the show really, and
Yeah.
I don't think that the show has really solidified what it's about yet. And let's say, obviously, I'm hoping for Ahsoka as soon as possible. But once he runs into Ahsoka, does he drop the child off and then go do something else? Like what does he do? What is the show? The whole show has been him having wild and wacky adventures with this little child. So, what does it become once we introduce the Jedi? And I had dinner with a friend, and we were talking about this, and I was saying how, in general, I think a lot of Star Wars stories are sometimes more interesting when they aren't about the Jedi. And
Sure.
that was one of the things I was really worried. Rebels for the first season is kind of Jedi-less, and then it turns out that he's not. And I think they made it work. But the Mandalorian, if there's a Jedi presence through the entire show, it's a completely different show than it is right now. So it'll be interesting.
And I suspect that will likely be the case. And I only say that because we don't know if this is confirmed or not. But if Rosario Dawson is playing Ahsoka, I don't think you go out and you get a talent like Rosario Dawson to be like a bit character. I just don't think someone like, I mean, to be a bit character, not that Ahsoka is a bit character, but to play someone so beloved in the Star Wars fandom as like just a cameo. So when they got Timothy Olyphant as a character you've never heard of, I'm like, that makes sense. But I don't think you go and get Rosario Dawson to play Ahsoka Tano. I don't think you put Ahsoka Tano on the show if you don't have a plan for that character. And to your point, I am a little worried about that because not that I don't generally think that if you add Jedis to everything in Star Wars that the quality just goes down. I think there's a case to be made for that point. I think that it's fine to say, hey, I just wanted a Western about a bounty hunter. Like, when was the last time Mando even took a bounty in this show? Like, I don't even, like, a while back. Or is he even in, I don't remember, is he even in the guild anymore? Or was he kicked out because he stole the child back? But to your point about what the show is, I feel like the setup is, what does it mean to be a Mandalorian? Like, is it the armor? Is it the creed? Is it fighting for what you believe in? I think the show is really going to be an identity show. Is who is Din Djarin? What does it mean for him to be a Mandalorian? Because he is obviously not from the planet.
Yep.
He has adopted it as this creed, and now he's faced with an actual Mandalorian, a royal Mandalorian, and the heiress.
Who kind of says your creed's bullshit, like
literally, and is going to try to take the planet back. So a lot of very interesting things in this episode. I'm not, see, here's my thing. I can't ever do this. I'm not anti-Ahsoka. I feel like I always come off as anti-Ahsoka. I'm pro-Ahsoka, but I think she gets a tendency to be overused because of how popular she is.
How do you overuse the best character in the Star Wars universe?
And I think that's where Filoni is. Like, I'm hoping that Jon Favreau and Filoni have a very steady hand with how they're doling out Ahsoka. What were some things you just overall liked about the episode? There's so much.
Long live the Empire. I really liked that, and I mean, it was just such a cool idea. It's kind of black and white in the movies. Empire falls, darkness is over, nothing bad ever happens again until the First Order. And we get, well, what about the people on the ground? This is kind of like the old Clerks joke. Like, what about, like, the janitors on the Death Star? Like, what about them? And I mean, that's kind of what, this is. This is a remaining pocket. And there's still very much, the emperor is gone, but what he taught, what he was spreading throughout the universe, there's actually some real world political parallels here. The ideas don't necessarily go away with the person spreading them.
Right.
And that's a really cool thing to bring in. And then the other thing is I think I've realized, this was in the same conversation I just had earlier, I think I've realized the thing that I really, really like about this show, and I think this episode pulled it off probably better than any of them, is there was so much weird physical, like 70s costumes. Like this could have been a random sci-fi show at 1 a.m. on any show, and any TV show in the 70s. Like, it felt old and physical and like rubbery and costumey, and
Yep.
not in a way that was fake, but in a way that the CGI and polished movies haven't felt like since the original trilogy.
Yeah, no, totally. I felt like the cantina scene in A New Hope, because like one of the things I liked about it was seeing the Mon Calamari and the Quarren, but like they had the practical. I mean, I actually don't know this, but it appeared to be practical.
Looked like it's practical, yeah.
Yeah, and so not a ton of CG animation there. I really enjoyed that. I really liked the opening. I don't know if it was the cold open before the title, but the Razor Crest kind of pratfalling into the water. I just thought that was hilarious. Like, I actually laughed out loud at that. I enjoyed the raid on the shuttle was awesome. I would say, like, with Bo and her crew and M.A.N.D.O, and clearly the last week's episode did have a point, and it was to get Baby Yoda out of the child out of this episode somehow. Like, they needed a babysitter, and they needed a reason for Mando to be on the planet. So you can work backwards and say, okay, that makes sense narratively. We couldn't have the child literally in a firefight like this, so we have to put him somewhere, and here you go. So that makes sense. I also think God, Bryce Dallas Howard deserves an Emmy for directing this episode, because holy shit, not only is it beautiful, paced super well, the performances were all phenomenal, I thought, from the additional Mandalorians to not just Katie Sackhoff. Again, voice work by Pedro Pascal is phenomenal. I thought all the Quarren were great, and she even did a nod to her father's, I would say, most famous movie that he directed, Apollo 13, with the Razor Crest coming in hot with all the flames coming off of him, which was a direct nod, which she even noted on Twitter. And then one of the last things I liked is there's a moment on the raid on the shuttle where they show the Mandalorians are coming up in an elevator, and then they show the stormtroopers like gearing up, like ready to go. And it's almost like a shot for shot of the opening of New Hope, where the rebels are all like gearing up before Vader comes in, and they're like freaking out, and like you can tell like the stormtroopers are like at unease. And I was like, this is awesome. It felt like a direct homage to that moment, except to flip the script and have the stormtroopers be scared. So I loved that. There's some just gorgeous shots on the water planet, and I just think Bryce Dallas Howard directed the absolute shit out of this episode, and I'm so pumped. Hopefully she comes back for more episodes, because I really think she did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, this was a great one.
All right, what are we looking forward to, or what are we seeing as potential threads that we're gonna have to pick up on for the rest of the season?
I think obviously I don't know if it'll happen this season. I think we're gonna go to Mandalore. The question I have is kind of how we get Mando there, because I think it's obvious that Bo is going to get her to take the planet back, but that's not really what Mando's shtick is. So how do we bring him into that plot and convince him to be part of this? I'm not sure, but I do think that we see that happen. If not the finale, then next season for sure.
I agree. I think the retaking of Mandalore is a potential like whole season plot arc or something to build towards, which I like because it seems like something is in the background. So I would say that there are kind of 6 threads, narrative threads that are in the mix. So Bo trying to get the Darksaber and retake Mandalore would be one. Mando's quest to reunite the child with the Jedi is 2. Whatever Ahsoka's doing is likely 3. Grief Karga, and Cara Dune, whatever they're doing, would be 4. Moff Gideon, and he has the Darksaber, and just whatever the Empire is doing, and then finally, we obviously can't forget that Boba Fett is lurking somewhere.
He just showed up.
He just showed up, and again, I still think that that's a Thanos setup. I think I was right on that, and I'm going to stick to my guns and say that that was a Thanos moment, and we are just going to get subtle teases that Boba Fett is going to become a main villain. I'm hoping. However, I will say that with Bo-Katan and Ahsoka being mentioned, I still think the easy money is that it's Boba Fett. However, if I were gonna go and play some odds on this, like I might hedge my bet and say that maybe Filoni could do a bait and switch and say that that's like a clone, or is it Captain Rex? Like I still think the Star Wars evidence makes the most sense that it's Boba Fett. The overall narrative sense makes the most sense that it's Boba Fett, but we'll see. So those are the 6 kind of narrative threads. Mando likely will detour because Carl Weathers, who plays Grief Karga, is directing the next episode. So we would assume that he comes in contact with Grief Karga and possibly Cara Dune in the next episode. So I don't know if we're going to meet Ahsoka right away. Could be a detour episode or even a detour arc, a couple 2 episodes that they have to team up on. But whenever we do meet Ahsoka, the show is going to fundamentally change because you can't add the Jedi. You can't unpull that plug for sure. Whatever, the toothpaste back in the bottle, whatever you want to say. You can't undo that. So interesting. How do you think that's going to play? Do you think I trust them, but how do you think that the introduction of a Jedi is going to play into this world?
I don't know. And I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting on so many levels. I mean, because this is really, I mean, the crossover here from the animated shows to live action, I think doesn't seem as big of a deal now just because of the way Star Wars is. But if you had told me like 5 years ago, like, oh, Ahsoka's going to be in live action on a Star Wars TV show, I never would have believed you. And now, I mean, obviously her popularity's grown, and I mean, it makes so much sense, now that they went back and did that extra season of Clone Wars that was mostly Ahsoka and Mandalore. They clearly had a game plan here. But it's interesting to me that, I think The Mandalorian was looked at to be an extension of the cinematic universe brought to TV. And now it's becoming this bridge bringing together the cinematic universe and the animated shows, which hasn't really been done. This is more Marvel type of world building than Star Wars has ever really seen. And that's a long way of me saying it's a really big deal, and I'm not sure how they will make it work. Ahsoka there are points in Ahsoka's journey where she isn't really even using the term that she doesn't consider herself a Jedi anymore. Whether or not, she could be completely closed off to the Force. That's possible. just her, seeing Yoda, is this going to be her, trying to train new Jedi? Which I think, I mentioned kind of ties into the novel with her and the Inquisitors and the Force-sensitive kids and stuff like that. She also might not be in The Mandalorian that long, and this just might be setting up her own show.
That's a fair point also. Disney is obviously going to look to expand the Star Wars TV world. Obviously, the Cassian show started shooting, the Kenobi show or miniseries is shooting. That could definitely be a play, and I wouldn't be surprised.
No, and that's the one thing that I'm I'm kind of wondering with the Mandalorian too is the Mandalorian's arc not necessarily an arc of his own, but is he just going to be this force that can move between, that it makes sense for him to move between all of these other stories? Like, is he going to be this connective tissue that, okay, he can just pop in and out and he can be in one episode of the Kenobi show. He can somehow pop into this other show. He can set up what's going to be Ahsoka's show, and Ahsoka's show goes off. Maybe we don't visit Mandalore and see the the retaking of Mandalore in this show. Maybe that itself is its own show. And the Mandalorian, the Mandalorian is just this character in Star Wars who can, within the universe, bounce between different parts that another character might not be able to do. There's a lot of ways they could take it.
A ton of ways, and I like that there are now seemingly a couple of different really interesting ways that this could go. Let me quickly pitch something to you, because you made a great point about this. Instead of being an extension of the movies and cinematic universe, it's more of like a bridge between the animated and movies. Mm-hmm. So let me pitch something to you. End of season 2, we finally get to Ahsoka. And as we pull up on Ahsoka and we see her and we're all excited by that, there's also someone else there. And it is a bearded, elder or older Ezra Bridger. And is there. And because that could be her answer to, hey, where were you during episodes 4, 5, and 6? And how do you not, like, what about Luke Skywalker? What about Yoda? Like, what have you been doing, Ahsoka? Because they're definitely going to have to reckon with that one way or the other. So I'm giving you an out and saying that Ahsoka went to find Ezra, and then we smash cut, if you will, to Moff Gideon somewhere in an Imperial headquarters talking to a superior, and we get Grand Admiral Thrawn. In live action, he's the one controlling the current empire, and I would die because that would be phenomenal. I want Grand Admiral Thrawn, make it Cumberbatch, give me practical blue makeup, red contact lenses. What do you say to that?
I think you could get maybe two out of 3 of those things. I don't know if you'll get them all at once.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that I think, as popular as Ahsoka is, she still is more of a big deal to you and me than she is to people who have just watched the movies.
Yeah.
And I think Ezra is a couple notches down below that. Still a really big deal, still something fans want, but if in your big moment of revealing Ahsoka, you then bring in another character that the audience might not be familiar with, and then you bring in another one with Thrawn, that might be a lot to swallow. It would be awesome.
It's fair. It's a fair point. I think you're right. I think you can't undercut Ahsoka's reveal. However, I'm trying to get Thrawn into the show. I'm trying to get Thrawn into the show, and I'm still trying to get a 81-year-old 2-robot hand Mace Windu, played by 71-year-old Samuel L. Jackson, into the show somehow. But overall, Willie.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, overall, in or out on this episode? I'm guessing. Yeah.
Absolutely
in. Any last thoughts before we go?
I think I do want to play off that what you just said. I do think that there is a very good chance that someone more important to the universe than Moff Gideon is controlling things right now.
Yeah, and we talked about a possibility of the Necromancer Palpatine. Could be Snoke. We could play with that, but I think it would be very cool and very satisfying to fans of a bunch of different Star Wars subsects to have it be Thrawn. So, fingers crossed. I will say, huge negative. We are now 11 episodes into Mandalorian. It's still not Max Rebo. So the Revolution will have to continue on and live to fight another day. But we'll be back next week for Chapter 12. Willie, Clark, thank you so much. What a ride this has been. What a world we live in. Bo-Katan is in the flesh, and Ahsoka Tano is coming. This is the way.
This is the way.